What's going on, everybody? This is Brian Mazik, aka Unique Mazik, the hardest working man in sports and gaming. And we're leading it off with this word from Shams Sharania. This dude is he's a Chicago guy, so we got to show him love there. And also, he is right now, I call myself the hardest working man in sports and gaming. This dude has to be the hardest working man in NBA news and breaking news for free agency trades or what have you. He was the first to have this, that Bulls restricted free agent Zach Lavine agreed to a 4-year offer sheet with the Sacramento Kings. And now the Bulls have 48 hours to match the offer. The offer does not have any trade kickers, and it does not have a team or player option. Now, there was a rumor prior to the news breaking that Zach would be signing this deal, signing the offer sheet. There was some news out there that was saying that Zach, originally the Kings drew up an offer sheet that was for $18 million a year. So for the 4 years, but Zach rejected that offer and said, that he would only sign it for the $20 million a year, which was really smart, because what it did basically was it tested just how much did the Sacramento Kings want him. And then it also tests to see how much do the Bulls really want to retain him. Because if the Bulls are not willing to fork over $20 million a year for the next 4 years, then they're going to have to let Zach walk. And that's what really the subject of this video is should the Bulls match this offer sheet? Now, before I say my opinion, we're gonna take a look at some of the things that some of the people around the Bulls writers are chiming in and saying. Nick Friedel, who actually got into a slight little back and forth with Zach about a week ago when the rumors first started to roll out that the Kings were interested. Nick tweeted, he's from ESPN. He says, "Congrats to Lavine for landing the offer sheet. That's a ton of money. Having said that, there is no way I would match that if I were the Bulls." And Nick has a few more pieces of information that he comes with. He says, the Butler deal is a sunk cost. It's over. Matching the Lavine offer sheet just because you don't want to lose an asset from a past trade isn't good business if the price is too high. So that's the people who are saying that the Bulls have to match this offer if they want to. Casey Johnson, the Chicago Tribune, said that the Bulls needed to match the offer if they want to maintain the momentum of the rebuild. So that's his take. Here's someone else. This is Jason Pat. He's a Bulls blogger, and he also writes for Fansided. He says, "I don't like the money for Lavine, but losing him for nothing would be real tough. Cap is rising, so I lean toward matching myself, but don't feel good about it." That's what he says. All right, and then I think we got one more from Nick Friedel. And Nick Friedel says, "If the Bulls believe that he can turn into a game-changing player over time, then go for it. But I have never gotten the sense there is that kind of belief within the organization up to this point." Okay, so here's where I am with it. I feel very similar to Jason Pat, but I think I lean more towards Nick Friedel. Traditionally and historically, the Bulls have gotten themselves into trouble by making knee-jerk reactionary type of signings. And I'll bring up one to give you guys an example. And the Bulls did go to the Eastern Conference Finals with this team, but I think overall, I think everybody would think that it was probably not the best idea. Back in, 2010, the Bulls, everybody in the NBA who had salary cap money was looking for a way to sign LeBron James, Chris Bosh, and Dwayne Wade. I think Amari Stoudemire came off the board as a free agent like that. Went to New York. That's where he wanted to go. He didn't even barely listen to anybody else. Boom, went straight there. But Bosh, James, and Wade everybody knew they were a package deal. If you could get one, you can probably get the other two. Bulls did their pitch. So did a whole bunch of other teams. Everybody knows the Miami Heat ended up winning that. They went to 4 straight NBA finals, won 2, lost 2. But the Bulls, because they did not get either, Bosh, Wade, or LeBron, ended up saying, okay, well, if we don't get them, then we got to spend our money on something. We're going to spend this free agent dollars on Carlos Boozer. Now, Boozer, I like Boozer as a Bull more than a lot of people. I give Boozer more respect as a Bull and for his tenure with the Bulls than a lot of people. But I don't think anybody would argue that his impact was on par with Chris Bosh's, on par with, with Wade's, and certainly not on par with LeBron's. But the Bulls had this max salary cap spot to spend, and they threw it at Boozer. And I think ultimately, in retrospect, the Bulls might have been better off maybe signing people to 1-year deals, or just spending the minimum, because there's a minimum amount of your salary cap that you have to spend, because if you don't, you get taxed for spending too little. I don't know if a lot of people know that there's a certain bottom level that you have to spend, because obviously that's to keep teams from just not caring about winning at all and just putting out whatever and saving all of the money off of their salary cap, right? So I would have spent what we needed to spend to make sure that we were over that level. But if I didn't love Carlos Boozer, I wouldn't have given him that money, right? So I don't know how the Bulls really feel. Obviously, he wasn't their first choice because they didn't come after him first. But like I said, if I didn't love him, I wouldn't do it. So in this situation, if I don't love Zach Lavine after I've seen him play for 20 some odd games, dealt with him as far as, training and development, conditioning, whatever the case, if I don't love him, especially if I don't love him $20 million a year worth for 4 years, I'm not giving him that cash, because it's easy to say, okay, like Nick Friedel was saying, well, we gave up Jimmy and we got Chris Dunn. We ended up getting a pick that was Lauri Markkanen. It looks great. And we, there was some rumbles that we might not have liked Chris Dunn. If we don't take this, if we don't sign Zach Lavine, then what do we get? Well, you get financial flexibility is what you would get. You get further financial flexibility, because if you don't, I don't dislike Zach Lavine. I like Zach Lavine. I think that he's shown some flashes, but I would have hoped to have seen a little more growth, even though, yes, I do understand that he's coming back from an injury. And I wouldn't cry my eyes out if the Bulls matched this offer. I would not. But paying a guy $20 million for 4 years is saying that you believe that this guy is going to be a superstar cog-like player in a championship contending team. And if the Bulls don't feel that way about Zach Lavine, then they're making a mistake signing him or matching this offer sheet. Now, some people say, well, what should they do? Well, one thing that I would do, because you have 48 hours to sign it, to match this deal. I'm on the phone with Marcus Smart, and I'm not a big, humongous, like some people. I think Marcus Smart. I think Marcus Smart is a good player, right? I think he's a good player. I don't think he's a great player. I think he's a good one. But I would, and I'm not giving him $20 million a year either, because he's not worth that either. But I am filling that roster spot, and I am potentially looking at filling that starting shooting guard role with Marcus Smart. He's going to be a cheaper option. He's going to defend. He and Chris Dunn defending would give the Bulls one of the elite, if not the best, defensive backcourts in the NBA. Okay. They already have shooting at almost every other position. So you got, Lauri is a great outside shooter. Chandler Hutchison seems like he can become a solid outside shooter. Denzel Valentine's coming back. He's a good outside shooter. Bobby Portis can stretch the floor. Wendell Carter Jr. is apparently able to stretch the floor. Hopefully we'll see that moving forward. The Bulls have some shooting options at other places. They don't necessarily need Chris Dunn and Marcus Smart to be a great shooter. And here's the thing that I think about when we're talking about, and I don't want to do a direct comparison necessarily to Marcus Smart and Zach Lavine, but I do want to say this. The thing that Marcus Smart doesn't possess that keeps him from going to the next tier as a basketball player is a consistent outside shot, right? If Marcus Smart's a good ball handler, he's a pretty good passer, he's an outstanding defender, strong mentally and physically, just a solid, very solid NBA player. There's no question. You know who you get with Marcus Smart. 100% you know what you get. And there's a chance that there's still a little bit of an incline for his career because he could improve as a shooter. With Zach Lavine, there may be some issues or some questions about his instincts, which is something you really can't teach. There's no questions about athleticism. There's no question about anything like that. I mean, when Zach's jump shot is falling, he's an explosive scorer that can go for 30. That's the type of guy he is. But he's not an efficient scorer. If you look at his efficiency numbers, and this is one of the biggest knocks on Zach Lavine, is that he's not efficient. You look at that. You look at his defense, which is pretty porous. As a Bulls fan, if anybody has watched Zach Lavine defend in the 20-some-odd games he played, and then even back to his time with Minnesota, he's not a good defender. And he doesn't seem to give a lot of effort on that end of the floor. Could that change? Absolutely. That could change. But then you have to ask yourself, what is the chances that it's going to change after he signs a 4-year, $80 million offer sheet, as opposed to before he had the $80 million offer sheet? So I don't know. I feel that you get Marcus Smart for cheaper if you can, because right now negotiations between him and the Boston Celtics have not been going well. He is upset with them because there has been a lack of communication. So that is one thing to keep in mind. He may be out there for the Bulls to swoop in and give an offer to. And I'm going to tell you, it's not going to take $20 million a year to secure Marcus Smart. So then you would ask yourself, now, while on paper you take a step back and you say, okay, well, who's a better player? Who's a better athlete? You might ask yourself, well, oh, wow, clearly Lavine's a better athlete. It would seemingly have more of a ceiling than Marcus Smart. But on the floor, which player would make the biggest impact for the Bulls' bottom line? And the other thing that's to remember, we always talk about Zach Lavine and his upside, but it's not as if Marcus Smart is at the end of his career. Marcus Smart's only 24 years old himself. So that is another thing to consider. This is a very young free agent who, when he was coming out of high school, he was one of the most highly regarded players in the nation. During his one season with the Oklahoma State Cowboys, he was very highly regarded. So I mean, he's literally 1 year older, almost to the day, 1 year older than Zach Lavine. I mean, both of their birthdays are in March. Marcus Smart's birthday is March 6th, and Zach Lavine's birthday is March 10th. So we're talking about two guys in the exact same age bracket. And I think most people would agree that at this point, you might even be able to say Marcus Smart is more solidified into the type of player he is. $80 million for 4 years is a lot. It's a lot. And if, I'm looking at the chat now, the big unit says, if he plays well in Sacramento, it would look worse than if he played like Bonds for us. No, I don't think so. I don't think it would. I think if he plays well in Sacramento and the Bulls can still find a player who comes in and plays well and helps the team to improve, especially a younger player like Marcus Smart, then at that point, it kind of doesn't matter what Zach Lavine does in Sacramento. But if you have him in a Bulls uniform and he's not good, he doesn't help elevate the team, then there's nowhere else to look. There's nowhere else to hide. It is clear as day. This is a bad move, so I wouldn't agree with that one, big unit. Him going to Sacramento and playing well doesn't mean that the Bulls have made a bad decision. him staying him staying in Chicago and not living up to $20 million a year is the worst look that can happen, because then you're also stuck with him, because now you can't, it hinders your ability to improve, because you have your salary cap situation is strapped with this $20 million, and now it becomes one of those really bad contracts that every single team wants to avoid. So Jesus is my king 777 says the Bulls probably want to make a run at Anthony Davis. I absolutely think they do. They should. They should. That should be part of their long-term goals. But how realistic is it doing that if you're going to match a $20 million a year offer for Zach Lavine, knowing you're going to also have to play marketing? Um, you know, I don't know. Three Cross says he still thinks that Lavine has all-star potential. It's hard for me to argue against that. I can see that, but at this point, from what you've seen from him, can you warrant giving him $20 million a year? I don't know. And Big Unit says the Bulls aren't competing for the finals in the next 4 years regardless. Might as well bet on young Lavine instead of letting him leave. I disagree with that as well. We don't know how in the East, with everything up and down, the Eastern Conference is a player or two away. You're a player or two away from being a serious competitor, a serious contender in the Eastern Conference with LeBron gone. So you can make a relatively quick rise. I mean, look at what happened with Philly. Philly was nowhere near the playoffs. You know, they were nowhere near the postseason, but you inject a healthy Embiid and a healthy Ben Simmons, and two players away. So I don't know. I don't know. Uh I don't know. A lot of people are talking about Melo, but I don't think they're talking about Melo for the Bulls, especially not at this point in his career. I don't see how he helps. I couldn't imagine him wanting to come to the Bulls, especially in a rebuilding situation. Even though the Bulls are not, I don't think the Bulls are at the very beginning of their rebuild, but I couldn't imagine that. Yeah, kid from Georgia says he's not a franchise player or a superstar. He's not a franchise player, not yet. No, I mean, and there's legitimate doubt that he will ever be. So, Jesus is my king also puts up the Kings lineup. What his starting lineup could be: De'Aaron Fox, Zach Lavine, Bogdanovich, Marvin Bagley, Willie Cauley-Stein. It could be super athletic and super exciting, but I could see a whole bunch of turnovers and some poor execution down the stretch and some bad shots and all that kind of stuff there. I mean, that's like a 2K team, but I don't know about in real life how that works out. You know, that's a lot of things. I mean, a lot of times people start to, talk about these teams and how it looks good on paper. And yeah, if it's 2K, that looks great. But, I really think the Bulls should really consider giving a call to Marcus Smart and figuring out what it would take to what type of deal would he sign, what type of offer sheet would he sign, and what it would take to pry him away from Boston. What wouldn't they be able? What wouldn't they be willing to match? I don't know. And it's crazy because as I'm looking at you guys' responses, it seems to be like almost, well, I don't know. It looks like it is a little bit slanted towards don't match. But we do have some people who are saying that they should match. Some Fresh Prince TV says the Boston will match for Smart. He's too important to that second unit. Yeah, but I don't know. I mean, Boston has to have a cap of what they want, go over for a bench guy. Think about it. Are you willing to pay because the Bulls would be offering Smart a starting spot? 100%. He's starting from the day he walks in, right? So the Bulls can afford to pay him like a starter, which would still be less than what they would be giving to Lavine. But then now the question then falls on Boston. If this offer sheet is $14.5 million, maybe $15 million a year, which is pretty hefty, so we're talking about a 4-year, $60 million deal. If that's the case, is Boston willing to pay a second unit player that much? So then that's the question that they would have. So um, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, you said should the Bulls try to get Sacramento to agree to a Larice Ridgeway? What's going on, Larice? Appreciate you, man. He says should the Bulls try to get Sacramento to agree to a sign and trade involving Buddy Hield and a pick swap? Who? Um, that's somewhat interesting. Um, that's somewhat interesting. I mean, you could make the argument that that might work out for both teams. I'm not sure, um, because it does appear that Buddy Hield is probably being slotted backwards if the Bulls make that deal. I don't know. That one's kind of interesting. I honestly though, if I'm the Bulls, I want to make because here's the thing with the Bulls. Here's what the Bulls are. The Bulls don't know who their stars are yet, right? Nobody has played their way aside from maybe marketing. It's okay. Here, this is the key. This is the sum up of this whole thing, right? The Bulls don't know who their stars are yet. The only person who has stepped forward in a way that would make you think, okay, this guy is a absolute cornerstone is Laurie Markkinen. He's the only one, right? So when it comes down to committing money to players, you want to commit money to guys who have solidified themselves as a superstar. Zach Lavine hasn't done that yet. So essentially, if the Bulls were to give him that, they're saying you are one of our superstars. If the Bulls were to do a sign and trade, they would still be committing that money to someone that they don't necessarily know or think is a superstar. So that you don't pay until you know. And I'm not saying you have to wait until they average 25 a game or whatever, but you do need to see that there is a steady incline. And apparently, and judging off what I saw, there's not a definitive message there that says that Zach Lavine is going to be that guy. So that's you can't just you so many things happen that will kind of speed up the process and make a team feel as though they need to make a decision before they actually do. And the Bulls don't need to make a decision on where to spend this money just yet. And if that means that they have to risk losing out on Zach Lavine, who hasn't really shown that he is that guy yet, then that's just what that means. And they can use that money someplace else, maintain the flexibility to do whatever it is that they need to do. But it's not about just spending and feeling as though you have to spend. So Fresh Prince TV says Smart is not a good fit on the Bulls. He's a hustle and good guy. He needs a playmaker. Bulls don't have that. I don't know about that. I think Chris Dunn's a pretty good playmaker. I think Chris Dunn is a pretty good playmaker. He works really well with screen and roll. I mean, definitely Smart. Smart is not a guy who the Bulls are any team at this point would be looking at to score a ton. He needs to improve his outside shooting. That's across the board. That's no matter. Even with Boston, he needs to improve his outside shooting. That's a fact. And I'm going to tell you, in Boston, with the return of Hayward and with the return of Kyrie Irving and with the emergence of Rozier, Smart could find his minutes dwindling anyway, and that could be the reason why Boston hasn't been forward with reaching out to him, because those minutes at the guard position are going to get really tight because you got Hayward, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, all three of those guys. I got to find minutes at the 2 and 3 spot. So I don't think Smart's taking minutes from any of those three. So that's the thing about it, man. I don't know. Lavine does don't cry just work. Lavine does have next level athleticism for sure. And I have never gotten the indication that he doesn't work hard, which is part of the thing that scares you. because if he works hard and he has the level of athleticism that he has, why hasn't he ascended a little bit higher than where he is? What's holding him back? And why haven't we seen him to be a superstar waiting to happen just yet? And I don't think that anybody really feels that way, that he's a superstar waiting to happen. So I don't know. I have to say I don't match, and I go looking for a cheaper option than maybe even somebody I can sign to a shorter term deal. But I definitely go looking. I'm not going to be forced to pay him 20 million a year. But then, like I said, if the Bulls do pay him 20 million, then I'm not. I'm not going to say I'm just, oh my God, the worst deal ever. But if it were my decision, I would not. I would not. Let's see what else. Somebody said something here. Somebody said, "What are your thoughts on Tony Parker signing with the Charlotte Hornets?" Just one of those deals, man. Insignificant. Tony's pretty much done, man, at being an impact type player. I have half the time I have no idea what Charlotte's doing. Like, what was that? Like, for what? Like, I'm not. I don't see what that was about. But okay. I mean, I think the most significant part of that is that Ginobili is the last of that Spurs big three left on the team. The Spurs, and if Kawhi is leaving, like just about everything we've known of the Spurs for a long period of time is just changing completely, like right before us, and it's happening relatively fast. So, you know, it is what it is. Yeah, and William Z brought up a good point. He said, "How many of those stars actually want to play in Chicago?" And he's right about that, because that's one thing that the Bulls have to address. The Bulls have to address their inability to sign major free agents, because clearing cap space is one thing, but if you're clearing cap space just to get rejected, which is what has unfortunately happened to the Bulls time and time again. If you think back at all of the major free agents that have all the major free agent classes and things like that that have come across over the past, man, 20 years, literally 20 years, ask yourself, how many of those major free agents have the Bulls been able to sign? I mean, it hardly none. Like, I remember, just show you just how far back I go. I remember when the Bulls had an opportunity. Well, the free agent class was Tim Duncan, Tracy McGrady, Grant Hill. The Bulls had them all come out. They thought they had a deal for Tracy McGrady. Tracy McGrady actually threw out the first pitch at a White Sox game. They thought they had him. And Tracy McGrady talked about this years later, and he said it was unfinished business, felt that he should have signed with the Bulls or whatever. They didn't get him. Neither of the three major free agents came. Then obviously we have the LeBron, the Wade, and the Bosh thing. They didn't get him that year. And the Bulls made a similar mistake the year that I was just talking about with the McGrady, Duncan, and Grant Hill. I believe that year they signed Ron Mercer to like a max deal, a guy who had not proven himself to be a superstar on the cusp, but they did it because the big guys turned them down. Nowhere in the world would I get Isaiah Thomas. Nowhere in the world. I think he is bad for locker rooms. I think he has a Napoleon complex, and I think he is forever a defensive liability. And with the injury, I think that's a really bad move, because he's not the type of guy who can afford to lose a step. At 5'8", he cannot afford to lose any mobility, any speed, any explosiveness at all. So I would not go for Isaiah Thomas at all, because there's a limit to him even when he's healthy, 100% healthy. But I think the Bulls didn't draft Michael Porter Jr. because they know that they cannot afford to make a mistake at this point in their rebuild. You cannot afford to draft a bust, because you don't have cornerstones necessarily on your team as of yet. And if you're staring at a kid like Wendell Carter Jr. and you think that he is a sure thing, even though his ceiling may not be as high as Michael Porter Jr., he's more attractive to draft than MCPJ because I'm sorry, than Michael Porter Jr. He's more attractive to draft because Porter could, like, he already pretty much, everybody says he's going to miss his entire rookie season. Okay. On top of that, we've had very little time to see him play against top level competition. That's a really big risk for a team in the Bulls situation. The Bulls haven't been a serious contender for a long time. We're talking about almost 10 years now since they've been a serious contender. They've been going through a rebuild for some time. They can't afford to make a mistake. They can't afford to make. So to me right now, they're smart to go safe. At one point, I did want Michael Porter Jr., but after I really thought about it, I thought that was the right move to go safe. Let's see. And what else do we have? Don't Cry Just Work was talking about Harry Giles. Harry Giles has been showing people a lot. He struggled a little bit in summer league. Had a lot of turnovers, but that's to be expected. He hasn't really had a lot of reps against top competition, but yeah, he definitely has a lot of talent. Didn't get a chance to really show everything he could do because he got hurt in college. But he was another one who was a really highly touted high school basketball player coming out of college. All right, peeps. I just wanted to chime in and throw out my thoughts on this Zach Lavine situation. As always, I talk sports and I talk gaming. I expect to see some decent news on 2K next week. I think 2K, this might be a good week for 2K in terms of news. I don't know for a fact, but I think so. We might see something decent. If not next week, then probably the week after that. So anybody that's here that's a 2K fan, keep your eyes peeled on that. I always appreciate you watching. Of course, God bless and peace.